In 1940, the skies over Europe were a deadly chessboard. German Messerschmitts, British Spitfires, and French Dewatines danced in tight turns and rapid dives. But across the Atlantic, in factories stretching from California to Connecticut, a different kind of aircraft was taking shape. Bigger, heavier, and built for something far beyond dogfights. By the end of World War II, the United States had not only outproduced every other nation in aircraft numbers, it had redefined what air power meant. American bombers could fly farther, carry more, and take more damage. Fighters like the P-51 Mustang changed the rules of aerial warfare. And behind it all was a design philosophy that quietly but decisively pulled ahead of Europe's. This wasn't just about engines or wings, it was about how America approached war, with scale, with systems, and with a vision of air dominance that extended far beyond the battlefield. Today, we'll explore how American aircraft design surpassed that of Europe, not just in speed or firepower, but in strategy, logistics, and long-term thinking. From the drawing boards of North American aviation to the skies over Berlin and Tokyo, this is the story of how design became destiny. If you enjoy deep dives into the decisions that shaped history, don't forget to subscribe and join us as we uncover the strategic edge that helped the U.S. win the war in the air. In the early 1930s, while most European nations were still refining biplanes and short-range fighters, the United States Army Air Corps issued a bold requirement: a multi-engine bomber capable of flying 2,000 miles at 200 miles per hour, carrying a 2,000-pound bomb load. It was a radical idea. At the time, no other country was seriously pursuing long-range strategic bombing. But Boeing responded with a prototype that would become one of the most iconic aircraft of the war, the B-17 Flying Fortress. The B-17 wasn't just a plane, it was a statement. With 4 engines, a wingspan of over 100 feet, and up to 13 machine guns, it embodied a uniquely American belief that air power could win wars by striking deep into enemy territory without the need for ground invasion. In contrast, European powers, especially Britain and Germany, focused heavily on tactical aircraft. The Luftwaffe invested in fast, agile fighters like the Bf-109 and medium bombers such as the Heinkel He-111, designed for short-range missions in support of ground troops. The British, too, emphasized defensive air power, preparing for what they feared would be another trench war. But America was thinking bigger, literally. The B-17's design prioritized survivability and range. Its aluminum skin was reinforced, its engines were overbuilt, and its defensive armament was unmatched. Crews often returned with massive damage, yet the aircraft kept flying. This resilience became legendary. More importantly, the B-17 was designed with mass production in mind. Boeing, Douglas, and Lockheed worked together to standardize parts and processes. By 1944, American factories were producing up to 16 B-17s per day. No European nation could match that scale. This industrial advantage was no accident. It was the result of a design philosophy that saw aircraft not just as machines, but as tools of strategy, tools that had to be reliable, repeatable, and repairable. And while the early bombing campaigns over Europe were costly, the long-term payoff was enormous. With the introduction of long-range escorts like the P-51 Mustang, another triumph of American design, the B-17 could finally reach Berlin and beyond, crippling German industry and morale. The European approach, while technically impressive, lacked this strategic depth. Their aircraft were often faster or more maneuverable, but they were built for a different kind of war, one that was already becoming obsolete.
By designing for endurance, scale, and strategic reach, the United States had quietly rewritten the rules of air warfare.
In the early years of the war, American bombers like the B-17 faced a deadly problem. They could fly deep into enemy territory, but they couldn't defend themselves all the way there and back. Without long-range fighter escorts, formations were torn apart by German interceptors. Losses mounted. Morale dropped. The U.S. needed a solution, and fast. Enter the P-51 Mustang. Ironically, the Mustang began as a British request. In 1940, the Royal Air Force asked North American Aviation to build a new fighter. The result was a sleek, low-drag airframe with excellent speed and maneuverability. But it wasn't until American engineers fitted it with the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine that the aircraft reached its full potential. The transformation was dramatic. With the Merlin engine, the P-51 could fly over 1,600 miles with drop tanks, enough to escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. It was fast, agile, and deadly at high altitude, and it could be mass-produced. This was more than a technical upgrade, it was a strategic breakthrough. For the first time, American bombers had a reliable escort. German fighters, once dominant over their own skies, now faced a new threat. The Luftwaffe began to lose experienced pilots faster than they could replace them. Air superiority started to shift. The P-51 wasn't just a great plane, it was the product of a uniquely American approach to wartime innovation. It combined foreign and domestic engineering, rapid prototyping, and industrial scalability. It was designed not just to win dogfights, but to win the war. European fighters like the Spitfire and the Bf-109 were excellent in their own right, fast, nimble, and battle-tested. But their designs reflected the geography and strategy of European warfare. The American approach had to be different. The U.S. was fighting a two-ocean war. It needed aircraft that could operate over vast distances in harsh conditions and be repaired quickly in the field. The P-51 met those needs and then some. By 1944, bomber losses dropped dramatically. Missions that once cost dozens of aircraft now returned with minimal damage. The skies over Europe were no longer a death trap. They were a corridor to victory. And the Mustang became a symbol of that shift, a sleek silver spear that pierced the heart of enemy defenses and never looked back. By 1945, the skies told a different story. What began as a war of attrition had become a demonstration of industrial and technological dominance. American aircraft no longer just matched their European counterparts, they surpassed them in range, reliability, and strategic purpose. But the real legacy of American aircraft design in World War II wasn't just measured in victories, it was measured in what came after. The war had proven that air power could shape the outcome of global conflict, and the United States, with its vast manufacturing base and forward-thinking design philosophy, was uniquely positioned to lead in this new era. Post-war, the lessons learned from aircraft like the B-17 and P-51 fed directly into the next generation of aviation. The B-29 Superfortress, which dropped the atomic bombs on Japan, was a direct evolution of the same design principles: long range, heavy payload, and survivability. It was the first bomber with a pressurized cabin and remote-controlled gun turrets, technologies that would define strategic aviation for decades. Meanwhile, the U.S. Air Force, newly independent in 1947, embraced the idea that control of the skies was essential to national security. This belief shaped everything from Cold War deterrence to space exploration. European nations, devastated by the war, struggled to keep pace. Their aviation industries were fragmented, underfunded, and often reliant on American support.
While Britain and France would eventually rebuild strong aerospace sectors, the post-war balance of power in the air had clearly shifted. And it all traced back to a wartime decision to design not just for the next battle, but for the next decade. American aircraft design during World War II wasn't perfect. There were setbacks, delays, and hard lessons. But the willingness to think big, to prioritize range, resilience, and mass production gave the United States a decisive edge. It was a philosophy rooted in geography, resources, and strategic vision, and it worked. Today, the echoes of that era are still visible. The U.S. continues to lead in military aviation, from stealth bombers to unmanned drones. The foundation was laid not just by engineers and pilots, but by a nation that understood the power of design to shape destiny. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all, that in times of crisis, the right design, backed by the right strategy, can change the course of history. As we look back on the aircraft that helped win World War II, we're reminded that victory isn't just built in the skies, it's built in the decisions made long before takeoff. What other moments in history were shaped not by the battle itself, but by the blueprint behind it?